So this book is actually primarily about the first 14 grandmothers, as the title indicates, how 14 grandmothers inspired a mental health revolution. A lot of people don't know that a lot of what we train is based on the knowledge that we picked up from the grandmothers. So when we talk about level 1, level 2, and level 3 in our trainings, all of that is really from what we were learning from the grandmothers. And this book describes that process, the journey, the stories of each of the 14 grandmothers, and I guess what I learned from interacting with them. Normally when I do a book review, I start from any random page unless the audience prefer to focus on a specific area. So what I'm going to do is I will read something that is more of an introduction to the Friendship Bench and why I think it's important. And I'll start from the preface 17, and I'll start reading. It's a very small paragraph, but it will give some context. Here we go. Although my story is mostly set in my home country of Zimbabwe, I have traveled the world and encountered many of the same problems in both developed and developing nations. Across the globe, we are beginning to recognize that the cultivation of community is crucial, especially given the number of people who struggle with loneliness and isolation. When we remember that we are not alone, that in fact we have priceless shared resources right under our noses, though we may not have seen them as such or even been encouraged to value their wisdom, transformation can happen, and oftentimes that transformation can be life-changing. I'll stop there. And the reason why I started with that is just to highlight how communities across the world are very similar in terms of what they desire. We often think there are huge differences as a result of our culture, ethnicity, and all of those kind of things. But as we introduce Friendship Bench to many parts of the world, I'm increasingly learning that as human beings, there's actually more that connects us than separates us. I just want to share a quote from one of the clients who is part of Friendship Bench and is part of the support groups. And she says, and I quote, "How ironic that we have been brought up to believe that we are poor when actually everything we need is right here in our community." And in essence, this is what we see not only in Zimbabwe, but in many different communities and societies where we take Friendship Bench. When you bring communities together, there's this overwhelming ability to problem solve, to resolve issues that are seemingly challenging. But when people are brought together, it somehow becomes possible to resolve them. I'll stop there before I carry on. I've got like 1, 2, 3 other quotations that I would like to read, but I'll take a break in case there are any questions, and then I will, if they are not, I will carry on. Okay, seems there's nothing. I will carry on. So my next reading will be from page 18. Just to put context before I read. The whole history of Friendship Bench is really based on a tragic event, which was the loss of a patient of mine called Erica. Erica took her own life, and when Erica took her own life by suicide, that was when I started to really think of how I could make evidence-based mental health more accessible to people in communities. And so page 18 is an interaction with Erica's mother after Erica has taken her own life. So she called me. Erica had taken an overdose. She had been admitted in a hospital, and we thought everything was okay. She was discharged, she went home, and then a few weeks later, she takes her own life. And so I'm starting with Erica's mother calling the hospital to tell me that Erica had killed herself. And here we go. 3 weeks passed after the call with the emergency room doctor in Mutare. It was mid-morning at the hospital when Nurse Takashinga alerted me to respond to a call in the duty room. It was Erica's mother, Sekai. "Doctor," she said in a muffled, somber tone, "Erica killed herself yesterday." The world stood still. I struggled to make sense of her words, which were candid and final. I had been so caught up with work that I couldn't thought of calling the emergency rooms in Mutare to find out how Erica was doing. I felt the searing pain of remorse come upon me all of a sudden as I contemplated what I would have, should have, could have done. She hanged herself from the mango tree in the family garden. Sekai's voice continued through the receiver. "I am so sorry, so sorry." I could barely manage to get my words out. All I could think of was the joy that Erica had told me she experienced in the boughs of the mango tree. And now, the tree would always be associated with this terrible moment. The silence that ensued seemed to last forever. Finally, I managed to say, "Erica was supposed to come for review as soon as she was discharged from the emergency room." No sooner had I finished my sentence than Sekai cut in, her voice laced with bitter regret. "We couldn't come to the hospital because we did not have the bus fare to come to the hospital." I felt the wetness of my palm around the plastic receiver, which I held tightly in my hand. Erica was gone because her family didn't have money for bus fare. Sekai cleared her throat. Erica had to stay at the hospital longer than expected to receive treatment. The hospital bill from the admission to the emergency room after Erica tried to kill herself left us financially crippled. We had to sell our goats to pay the medical fees because Erica ended up staying in the ER for a whole week. I'll stop there. That section of the book, for me personally, defines the whole philosophy behind Friendship Bench of, a friendship bench within walking distance. I came up with that vision for Friendship Bench, a friendship bench within walking distance, as a way of honoring Erica, because if we could have a friendship bench within walking distance everywhere, it means if people are lonely, if people are depressed, if people are feeling suicidal and they can't get to a hospital, but they have somewhere where they can walk and sit down and talk to someone, hopefully it can make a difference. So that's where the whole idea of a friendship bench within walking distance comes from. I will carry on and read I'll go to page 116. That was, I think, the last planned reading. And this is a paragraph about the grandmothers, actually, why they do what they do and what it means for them. And it reads, "It was not merely the sense of responsibility to their community that propelled their work. For them, it was the only way they'd ever lived and breathed, in connection to everyone around them. This was as true for their pain and sorrows as for their joy and laughter. While I had adopted a more Western way of thinking about people in relation to life as atomized parts of an always fragmented world, the grandmothers recognized something that the world at large is only now beginning to see and honor. We are all connected, and if we don't realize this soon enough, our persistent sense of isolation may tear us apart." And that paragraph kind of touches on part of the values of Friendship Bench, which is connection, why connection is important. I'll pause there. Any questions? Or better still, would anyone like to come and join me on the bench and read with me?
May I ask a question? I understood to a certain extent this concept of friendship bench would replace or would provide some therapy. Okay, friendship bench would provide some therapy. In German, we would rather use the word Beratung, counseling.
Yes.
Now, in what you read and what you told, it seems to me it is much more about community. So is maybe they are different focus, or does that go together? What would you say?
Great question. It all goes together. So one of the things that we learn from this book is counseling without building community is not sustainable. So when I first started doing Friendship Bench, I focused, thinking as a psychiatrist, I was thinking of just being a clinician. Let's focus on symptoms and come up with a diagnosis and come up with a treatment plan. And these grandmothers taught me that is secondary. What is primary is the story that a person brings. And the grandmothers, one of the first things I learned from them is to lean into the stories that people bring to the bench and not focus on a diagnosis that a person has. And so this is where the element of community becomes very important. But it's also captured in the different levels. So a lot of what I've touched on is mainly level 1 in our training. The level 2 and level 3 then embraces more of some of the clinical stuff. And I like to believe that when we engage, and I've actually changed the way I practice as a psychiatrist, I first and foremost focus on building that sense of connection with clients that I interact with, and not emphasize using the DSM-5. The DSM-5 is what we use to make diagnosis in psychiatry, and I don't. In fact, interestingly, since I started working with the grandmothers, I prescribe less medication for the same conditions that I used to prescribe a lot of medication. I'm not saying medication doesn't work, it does work, but sometimes if talking to someone and helping them to gain that sense of belonging and purpose is possible, it's probably better than medication. In a clinic setting, often there is no time to spend sitting on a bench and discussing. We're trained to try and come up with a diagnosis quickly and write a prescription. The Friendship Bench tries to do it the other way around. Don't rush to write a prescription, but rather get the story and use the story to help with the healing process. Yeah, so it's part of the whole thing. Any other questions? Or does someone want to sit on the bench? Welcome. Good. Do you want to open a random page and read, or do you want to? What would you like to do?
Random page.
Good, I like that. I like people who are random because it just shows the spontaneity of life, because that's what life is all about. Go ahead.
No, I don't want this one.
You don't want this one? That's fine. That's fine. Just keep going until you find something that you are comfortable with. And while you're doing that, maybe I can share a little bit about some of the images that are in the book, which I will talk a little bit about. Those the images are a reflection of the journey itself with the grandmothers and some of the people who have influenced some of the things that we do at Friendship Bench, which sometimes are taken for granted. I'm always taking or given the credit of Friendship Bench, but Friendship Bench has been made possible by a lot of people, especially the grandmothers. This is really a project which has been conceived and created by the grandmothers. What I have done is brought together the different elements, particularly of those first 14 grandmothers, and created the framework. And over the years, what I've also done is, from all the numerous publications, we've picked pieces and created the Friendship Bench in a box, the DIY strategy. So it's about teamwork. Have you found something?
No, continue.
Okay, and so I think as you bring Friendship Bench to Friedensau, while there's that element of reaching out to those who need support in many different ways, it's really also about building a community that supports each other. You are already a community here, and I think you're a great community. I think that the Friendship Bench training can help to strengthen that community by creating spaces where people feel comfortable to be vulnerable, which is another important element of Friendship Bench. When we truly create those spaces where we can be vulnerable, we have growth, and healing also begins to emerge in a very strong way. Another thing that I really hope will happen as we start this journey of working together, is how we can explore strengthening your capacity. Some of you are doing your masters, and I would love, for instance, and this is just a big dream of mine, I would love to see some of you end up doing PhDs, and I would be very happy to help facilitate PhD for some of you, maybe, if it's possible, through the African Mental Health Research Initiative, which I am the director, which is it's across Africa and supports PhD students, and we would be happy to nest Friendship Bench as part of your PhD programs and so forth. I would also love to see an exchange program with some of our students from Zimbabwe, finding a way of bringing them here on to engage and interact. So all of these things, I think, are possible, but we are beginning. We have to start somewhere, and then see how it goes. And I'm also excited that next week you have the German training, and it's unfortunate that I will not be around, but I would really love to know how that goes as well. So a lot is happening, and that really is the beginning of making a difference in communities. Can you tell us where you are reading from?
Page 53. Yeah. The chapter is Opening the Mind. The first step. Opening the mind. Oh, sorry. Chapter 3. The title is The First Step, Opening the Mind, and I'm reading from page 53. I'm starting in the middle of a sentence. However, the grandmother strongly felt that whatever issue a client might bring to them did not necessarily have to be attached to clinical condition. Grandmother Jack was adamant that depression was a Western concept that didn't resonate with her community. You can't use those terms here. They won't mean anything to people needing emotional support, she insisted. One of the common symptoms of depression is overthinking, a term commonly referred to as kufungisisa in Shona. While the grandmothers recognize that it is often accompanied stressful situation, they didn't see it as the primary symptom of illness at all. Rather, it was a natural response to a wide range of social, family, political, economic challenges that people were facing, something I had also come to think about more deeply in the wake of Mrambatisfina, as well as the loss of Erica.
Thank you. Thank you. That's a very important paragraph you picked there. Why did you pick it? Or what does it mean to you?
When you are talking about the 14 grandmothers and the concept of the friendship bench, I knew in my mind that you did not agree, like all of you did not agree to it at once. There were some things that you agreed together, and there are some things that you differed. So when I randomly guessed on this paragraph, I thought it made sense. It got me answered.
That is so true. And interestingly, when I started with the first 14, I thought I would be teaching them because they had very little education. Most of these 14 grandmothers had maximum of primary education, but it ended up being the other way around. They taught me, for instance, the idea of the word kufungisisa, which literally means thinking too much, and the insistence by the grandmothers that we should not use the word depression because it did not resonate culturally with our people. At the time, it didn't make sense to me, but as we carried on and carried out research, we realized that actually depression and a lot of other terms were not appropriate. And interestingly, we find that those same terms are not appropriate in a lot of other cultures. And so it's taught us to be very mindful when we introduce Friendship Bench in different cultures, because cultures have different idioms of expression for mental health issues. You know, in Vietnam, in El Salvador, for instance, they also don't focus on the word depression. You know, and as Grandmother Jack, as you read, Grandmother Jack said, depression is not so much the cause of people being unhappy. It's the social determinants and elements that are in our society, like loneliness, intimate partner violence, poverty, and a lot of other things. You know, the grandmothers believed those things also needed to be addressed, not just the symptoms of depression, because if we just focus on symptoms and send people back to the same environment where they were depressed, we're just creating this vicious cycle. And so the grandmothers always wanted to have an approach which seeked to address almost like a two-pronged approach. A person comes to the bench, they are struggling with they are living with HIV. They don't know what to do about being HIV positive. And so it's the grandmother who then becomes almost through like social prescribing, you know, they help that individual to get access to care, to get access to medication, and then you get a better outcome. So it's been more of a combination of all of those things and really building community, a sense of community and making people feel that they belong. Thank you. You can read some more if you want.
I recognize that we were engaged in a kind of mutual healing, that the Friendship Bench, with its focus on the power of community, was proving to be a necessary part of life as well lived. What was more, I had the sense that the key to healing lay in all the hidden treasures within African cultures, which I did witness firsthand on the trip to Benin, where I did fall under the spell of pineapples, voodoo, and that these treasures might help us transmute the suffering that seemed to infuse our individual and collective story. For this, I was beyond grateful. I'm interested to know what happened in Benin, but nice.
You will have to read the book. I don't need this, yeah, thank you. Yeah. Yes, you will have to read the book about Benin. Any questions? I want to just, I know you probably won't be able to see from here, from where you are, but I want to touch on some important pictures that are in this book. I'll start off with, so this is a picture of the grandmothers in Washington, D.C., who I treasure immensely. And on this picture, I'll just read what it says underneath. With some of the grandmothers of the Friendship Bench Washington, D.C. program in 2024. The time I spent with them as they expanded the program in the Anacostia neighborhood of D.C. was akin to drinking from a fountain of wisdom and knowledge. Really amazing people. I want to share maybe two more pictures, which this is Fred Hickling. Fred Hickling was a psychiatrist from Jamaica. I think in a lot of ways he saved my life. When Friendship Bench was beginning to grow, really showing positive traction. I was invited to present about the Friendship Bench in Canada. And again, it was a very tragic story. When I arrived at the airport, when we landed, I was picked out for what they called a random search. And I was accused of having cocaine. So I was stripped. You know, everything I had was opened. I was put into this little cubicle, literally made to undress, examined, and after a while, and I write about that in real detail, but I'm not going to go into the detail. But after a while, they told me, no, it's okay, it was a mistake, you can go. But the whole experience was extremely traumatic for me. It was the first time I was really traveling to go and share big news about my work, and there I was exposed to racism in a very visceral way. And when I arrived at the hotel where I was staying, I stood in front of the hotel lobby to check in. And this man walked up to me and he said, "You look troubled. What is happening?" And that's how my relationship with Fred started. And Fred said to me, so when I told Fred what had happened when I arrived in Canada, in Toronto, he said to me, "There are," and I quote, "there are certain things you need to be aware of when traveling as a black man." And so this man taught me a lot about self-awareness, when and the reality of the world is, you know, when you get to a certain level, as I am, most spaces you navigate are white. And this man helped me to learn how to navigate white spaces. So there's a whole section about Fred and his influence and how he's helped me. I'm going to share one more picture, which is very dear to me. This is a picture of me and grandmother Wiza. Grandmother Wiza is one of the 14 grandmothers, but she has a history. Most of you might not know the history of Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe used to be called Rhodesia. And in the 70s, there was a brutal war between the Ian Smith government, the whites and the blacks, putting it simply. Whites and blacks were fighting each other, killing each other. And this woman was a guerrilla fighter or a terrorist in those days. That's what she would have been called. And she was instrumental in blowing up one of the largest fuel depots in Harare, in Salisbury as it was called then. And she was caught, tortured, spent time in jail. And so when she comes to the Friendship Bench and listens to stories of people, she is bringing her trauma as well, but in such a dignified way that she really is a force, a healing force in her community. She is the oldest grandmother that we have that is still alive. She is 94 years old. I'll stop there. I think that's all I have to share about the Friendship Bench. You would have to read the book. Good.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know if my question is, you talked about it in the book. I'm more interested in finding out how it was when you're starting in terms of financing the whole Friendship Bench, and then also when you were maybe as it is now or back then, did you do any collaborations maybe with the Ministry of Health in Zimbabwe and maybe any other organizations that have pretty much helped you along the way in the Friendship Bench journey? Yeah, thank you.
That's a good question. So I do write about the financing of Friendship Bench in the book. Our earliest funder in a big way was Grand Challenges Canada. And that's why I was going to Toronto to share the results. You know, that was a very bad, traumatic situation that happened, but Grand Challenges Canada were actually very supportive of Friendship Bench. But before Grand Challenges Canada started supporting us, when I first started this project with the 14 grandmothers, I paid for the project using my government salary, which was not a lot at the time. So for a long time, I financed it out of pocket. And I think what I can advise young people who have an idea and you are passionate about something, don't wait for the money. Just start doing it, because the money will come later if you are doing something that you're really passionate about and has wider significance to others in the community. I think when I started Friendship Bench, we only started getting meaningful money after like 6 years. You know, so for 6 years, I would have a budget, you know, based on my salary, you know, how much I would take out of my salary to support the grandmothers with stationery, to support the grandmothers with the teas that they needed to have during our debrief meetings, and to give them a small allowance for mobile, you know, all of that. Sometimes an element of personal sacrifice is necessary when you start something. And then, of course, after that, you know, Friendship Bench has become very successful with fundraising. Currently, we're going through a bit of a dip because of the US aid cuts. You know, the Trump government has cut US aid across the world. So that has affected us, but we're still running because we keep, writing more and more grants, and we've had a few successful grants from the Wellcome Trust recently. So the important thing for all of you young people, for instance, is just start. Don't wait for a big grant. Start. Yes, and so for the Minister of Health, again, that's a good question. It's in here. For the Minister of Health, while I was still with the 14 grandmothers, I realized that we were onto something, but no one really thought it was worth supporting. The City Health Department, the Ministry of Health, they did not want to support it, but they said, go ahead. And I realized that bringing them on board as stakeholders, even though they didn't want to support it, was still important, because they were part of the journey right from the beginning. And so last year, was it last year or the year before, the government of Zimbabwe formally started to financially support parts of Friendship Bench which is a big, big achievement for us. And the Friendship Bench is now in the National Health Strategic Program. It is part of the nationwide scaling up of programs. So it has been completely embraced by government, but it took a long time, you know. And when I started, government did not want to have anything to do with it. In fact, to some extent, the government thought this was something that was, because our government is a bit paranoid. Robert Mugabe was very paranoid. So they thought, well, maybe this is something that is about trying to get him out or something like that. So we did have some political issues in the beginning. Yeah, but it's important to be passionate, be focused, and if there's one lesson I've learned from this work, never ever think that you need money to make a difference in life. The money will come, but you can still start making a difference without it.
Yes. Okay, so my question is in two sessions.
Sure.
The first one is with the grandmothers. Did you have to win them over? Did you have to? Is there something you did that really got them really interested in the idea, or like did you have to? Was there a challenge in getting to them about this whole idea? And number two, has there ever been a time where in any country that Friendship Bench was introduced that there was no financial challenges, like people's personalities, how people warmed up to the idea and everything that worked to make it happen in any country? So these are the questions I have.
I'm not sure I got the second question.
So is there any country that Friendship Bench was introduced that there was a challenge of interest? You know,
Yes.
like, yeah.
Yeah.
That's the
I'll
second
talk
question.
about that, yeah. So with the grandmothers, there was resistance at the beginning, and I write about this. And the grandmother who was most resistant was Grandmother Jack. And I write a lot about Grandmother Jack in this book, but Grandmother Jack also ended up becoming my biggest ally, because she helped me to see the power of community and the importance of not just thinking as a clinician. So yes, there was resistance, and a lot of the stories I touch on in here are about the resistance of the grandmothers. A lot of them make sense, you know, from a cultural point of view. I, for instance, being a clinician, did not believe in praying with a client on the bench. And the grandmothers were very strong about the importance of prayer, you know. And I began to realize much later that you can actually use prayer as a way of guiding people. I always believed that as a Christian, what I do in my Christian life should not mix with my professional life. But I realized that with Friendship Bench, there was a way of actually bringing it all together, you know. So yeah. And then with regards to, with regards to countries where Friendship Bench didn't work, Jordan was one country where Friendship Bench didn't work. And the reason was because the organization that we partnered with, and this is usually the most common reason, the organization we partnered with lost its funding. The same thing happened in New York City. In New York City, we were working with the New York City Health Department under the mayor of New York City. De Blasio was his name at the time. They were really enthusiastic about Friendship Bench, and it grew very fast. But when he was voted out of office, the funding for the Thrive program, which supported Friendship Bench, was completely cut. So Friendship Bench is still in New York City, but it's not as big as it could have been had it been funded continuously through the mayor's office. So those are some of the issues. I'm thinking of where else. Botswana was another example where we took Friendship Bench, and the program, it was a youth component of Friendship Bench that we introduced in in Botswana. So the thing is, when we go to a new place, we never go on our own. We always partner with someone, because the strategy we use at Friendship Bench is we want to make others the doers at scale. So we would love to see your institution become a doer at scale of Friendship Bench. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. In Botswana, the department that we were working with was absorbed by another department, and the priorities of the department that absorbed them became first, and their priorities were then removed. So yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Dixon. Firstly, I'm going to say that you sound very therapeutic. I could listen and listen and listen just the way you speak. It's really amazing.
Thank you.
Yes. I have two questions, one of which is, you mentioned, I just hope I didn't hear wrongly, but you mentioned that Erica's situation inspired the Friendship Bench, right? Okay, great. Having said that, because I wanted to ask earlier on that, have you always had this Friendship Bench goal in mind for a long time? And seeing that it was Erica's situation that inspired it, how were you so confident that it was going to be a force to reckon with? That's one question. I don't know if you get my point.
So I didn't know it would become big.
Oh,
no, not at all. When Erica took her own life, there were two things on my mind. So first, I felt like a failure because I had failed to stop her suicide. She killed herself at a time when I thought she was doing well. Okay, so I felt like a failure. Secondly, I wanted to do something about it. And this was just a dream that I had. And this is why I started it using my own personal money. Because it was, I think it was in a way an atonement of sorts. Like if I use my own salary to do this project, I will be forgiven for having failed Erica, something like that. And so for a long time, I carried on with Friendship Bench using my government salary as a psychiatrist. It was not because I knew it was going to become big, no.
Okay, that's interesting. That's inspiring at the same time. My second question would maybe a little bit personal, right? But when you mentioned that when you heard about Erica's situation from her mother, there was this dead silence because you probably didn't know what to say, like the best way to respond and all of that. How did you manage not to be a miserable comforter at that point? Is it possible that you can run us through what was going through your head at that point, beyond being a failure, like you mentioned?
So, each time I reflect on that incident with the phone call, I think most of me was actually numb. And I also write in the book about the only time that I really opened up about Erica's death, and it was with the 14 grandmothers. And it's quite detailed about the response that I got from the grandmothers. Again, for me, that was an important lesson that when people are in pain, it's not always necessary to use words to try and comfort them. So when I shared the Erica story with the grandmothers, you know, and I was very tearful about it, the response that I got from them was they prayed for me and they sang a song for me, a very soothing, religious song which was extremely therapeutic. And I broke down. No one said anything. That's all they did. And you know, for me that really worked, because after that I could then talk about Erica, the loss of Erica, openly. And it then led me to give this TED talk in New Orleans, where I first publicly talked about Erica on a large scale to thousands and thousands of people. But the real opening was with the grandmothers. Yeah.
Can I ask you a question, please? I have so many things in mind, so I hope I'll be able to ask them all. I'd like to know how old is actually Friendship Bench, and I also feel like this presentation today is a continuous presentation, because I heard that there is going to be training for French, for German, in German. That says it has been going on. So I'd like to know the training, who are being trained. That is another question. And I also want to understand, I also heard you said that usually when you visit a place, you actually partner with someone or an organization or whichever the partner is. But I want to know in Friedensau, since it has been introduced, how is it going to be conducted? Like I heard that earlier you said it's a platform, a program whereby one could just walk in and end. So I want to know how is it going to be conducted here in the school, and by who?
So I'll let Sylvia and Andreas answer that. But your first question with you know, the Friendship Bench. The Friendship Bench is, you could say 2006, when I was still a junior psychiatrist. That's when it started. But for a lot of, it was not an organization. I did not start an organization. So in a lot of ways, it only started much later. But the word Friendship Bench was already being used. We were not registered. It was just me and 14 grandmothers. And I was using my money, you know. So formally registering of Friendship Bench only happened in 2000 and I think 15. And then I'll let you two answer the other questions.
Well, since I don't want Sylvia to brag about herself, I will do it for her. Now, Sylvia has actually read about Friendship Bench and has done a lot of research on it, what they're doing, what is going on, and was so enthusiastic that she thought, this is something for Friedensau, because Friedensau is such a multicultural campus, and we bring a lot of experience, and we do have problems on campus. And sometimes people feel lonely, feel left out, feel kind of homesick, whatever. Kufungisisa.
Kufungisisa, yes.
Kufungisisa is the only word I actually learned in Shona thus far. We have that at Friedensau. So she thought this may be a good idea. Now, how did it start? Obviously, we went through the procedures, we talked about it, and we talked with the university administration and made the decision we give it a try. Number one, to connect with Professor Dixon. Number two, give it a try whether it would work in Friedensau. So Sylvia talked to a group of people, a class, I believe it was, in the International Social Science, and advertised for a training as a kind of pilot program. Let's see whether we can do it, whether we can pull it off. And so we had a training, quite a number of evenings on a voluntary basis, where we had seven participants, okay? And Silvia is also teaching a class on empowerment in the MA in Counseling program, where she thought, with this particular group that she's teaching this year, we'll give it a try as well, because it has a lot to do with empowering people. Now, if this works, and thus far we are quite impressed what is happening in the English-speaking group that we have been training, if it works, this is something we will continue to utilize for Friedensau and beyond. We want to train people on a regular basis for working on the Friendship Bench, and we want you to take this home to your respective areas and communities to spread the word, so to speak. And in fact, here in Germany as well, we would like to spread it in a kind of systematic way. We start with Friedensau, we have a Friendship Bench on campus. You can reach us, you can contact us, but we want to go beyond Friedensau very, very quickly into communities around Friedensau and eventually all over Germany, because his big dream is it should be within walking distance. Now, I don't think we'll accomplish that goal within the next couple of years, but it sets our mind on a goal and orients us to where we want to be. So this is how we are going about it. And the rector is sitting there. He can verify that actually the university administration committed to doing this and supporting this. And we are very, very glad that this is a university project, not just a private endeavor of wonderful Silvia.
Nothing to add. Thank you.
I have like two questions. The first one is about the grandmothers. My understanding of a grandmother is somebody with a grandchild. But in my home, we use it to refer to women who are a bit older. So in your case, I would want to understand, is it something, a translation directly from the Shona, maybe to refer to someone old, or because even the 94, I think she should be even a great-grandmother. That's if she was blessed. So I want to understand, like, how was it? Was the age a factor, or how did you go about it? Yeah.
So age was not a factor. So the first 14 grandmothers, it was, initially when I thought of doing Friendship Bench, I thought I would actually train nurses, medical nurses. That was my idea as a psychiatrist. But I realized that the nurses were not interested in doing this, and I desperately wanted to somehow find a way of doing it. And from consulting people and exploring in community, I realized that, grandmothers were sort of the custodians of the local culture and wisdom. And I thought, how about just starting this with grandmothers? The 14 was random. I went up to a clinic, a primary healthcare clinic, and I said, I want 14 grandmothers from this area that I could work with. Can you recommend any that live in this area? That's how I got those 14 grandmothers. I didn't select them. They were given to me. And they happened to be grandmothers in the sense of, they have grandchildren. But you don't have to be a grandmother to do Friendship Bench. There are young people who also do Friendship Bench. We have a program for university students for Friendship Bench. In Vietnam, for instance, Friendship Bench is not delivered by grandmothers, Vietnam has a big problem with HIV, and which is as a result of drugs, and so they wanted a program that focused on the HIV community because they were really struggling. So in Vietnam, we use people living with HIV, and so they could be young men, young women. The most important criteria, because the Vietnamese government wants to focus on HIV, we select people who are HIV positive. So it's not a must that you have to be a grandmother. In El Salvador, we have Catholic nuns who work for the Catholic Church doing Friendship Bench.
Yeah, thank you. My second question is, when she was doing the introduction, she said that it is evidence-based, and then she said also, if something cannot be measured, then we will not know how it's working. So my question is, how is it measured? What are the indicators?
Great question.
And then to finish it, are there heavy conversations that cannot happen in a bench?
Are there?
Heavy.
Are there any?
Heavy.
Are there any heavy conversations that you can't have on a bench? No. No. You can bring anything at the bench. If the grandmother can't deal with it, she will refer. Yeah. And so the evidence, and this is, again, we talk about, there's a lot about it in here. Every person who comes to the Friendship Bench has a baseline score, which is based on a screening tool, which gives us an idea of how you're doing. Because while we lean into the story, it's also important for us not to miss anyone who might be, for instance, suicidal, or who might be severely depressed, that they need more than just sitting on the bench. So we have a baseline screening based on locally validated screening tools. And those screening tools are administered at the end again. And so we compare the baseline and the end line scores. And what we have also done over the years are a number of clinical studies, trials, comparing the grandmothers and other different delivering agents. So depending on where we are, that baseline measure can be different. In El Salvador, for instance, because of trauma, they are more interested in a baseline score that looks at PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorders. In Washington, D.C., they use the PHQ-9, which focuses on mainly depression. In Brighton and Sussex, they want to look at anxiety, so they use the GAD, with the generalized anxiety disorder screening tool. So that's how we know that it's working or not. But the other way we know that it's working or not is the feedback from the clients, the people who use the services. We have a customer care department which phones people, after they've had sessions. After, say, 6 weeks, they call them. How was your experience on the bench? Would you come back? Would you recommend someone to these services? And that gives us an idea if we're moving in the right direction. So we do triangulate data to try and be on top of things in terms of quality and things that might need improvement. And all our publications are available online. I'm happy to share the publications if you want to look at those. Good.